This is the Elastic Live User Group. I'm your host, Jay Miller, and I hope you are happy to have us back after that week off. I hope you had a great ElasticCon Global. I know I did. Really love some of the talks. You will be seeing some of the people that spoke on here in the future, but we're not talking about the future right now. We're going to talk about, well, maybe your career future. I am here with someone that I just met over this year in these pandemic times. And I'm so glad I did because they have shown me that, like, hey, we're out here doing it and this is awesome. So if you've remembered any of the conversations I've had with people outside of Elastic and just really interested in what they're doing and interested in how we inside of Elastic can help those individuals, then this is going to be the chat with you. I'm here with Kadesha Kerr. Kadesha, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Jay?
I'm doing all right. I am dreading this upcoming trip to LA I gotta take. I'm just kidding. It's gonna be fun, but let's get started by first tell everybody a little bit about what you do and ultimately how you got into this position of being like the person to talk to about getting into front end development.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Kadesha. I work as a front-end engineer in the fintech space. And a lot of people online know me as It's That Lady Dev. I share content online for new and aspiring engineers, specifically career changers, mostly.
I love it. So you're talking about career changers. That is the wrong one. There we go. You're talking about career changers. Where what was your journey in terms of I remember you saying you were a career changer yourself. So like
Mhm.
what was your journey into getting to where you wanted to be and getting into fintech, and like ultimately why did you choose that area?
Yeah, so I studied social work in college and I worked as a social worker for a few years. And then somehow I ended up in government doing administrative payroll stuff. Don't ask me how I got into finance from social work. And then from there, I transitioned into technology. And so, how that came about was in 2019, I was really struggling financially. And I realized that I really didn't have like a spending problem. I had an income problem. And so I had to figure out how to solve that issue. And one day I was browsing Instagram like I do, and I came across this finance blogger who said that she taught herself how to code in 9 months and she got a job as a software engineer earning a lot of money. And I was like, what? What is the codes? What are you talking about? What is this thing? And I kind of fell down the rabbit hole of free code camp, code academy, going to boot camp, crying every day at boot camp, and then landing a job. And so like that's the condensed version of how I got into front end development.
Real quick, I think your AirPod, your headphones, and your microphone is brushing against your hair a little bit on there. Just, I mean, I like the hair. I just want to make sure that people are hearing you. But
There we go.
that's awesome. I love that you have both the like, here's the kind of the free path, and then here's like the
Yeah.
quasi free, somewhat paid path, and then going into the boot camp.
Hmm.
Um, Real quick before I see some people jumping into the stream. First of all, welcome. If you have questions for myself or for Kadesha about getting into the realm of front end development, getting into development or the dev space as a whole, I'm also a career changer. I came from the military into marketing into what I do now as an advocate. Feel free to ask away in the comments. We'll be happy to get those answered for you. But talking about the idea of starting off the freeway and then
Yeah.
moving into a boot camp, what what was the indicator of like, all right, free code camp is great, but maybe I need a little bit more structure around this. Let me try a paid course or let me try,
Ah.
a boot camp.
Yeah, I think for me, I started the free route because I honestly had no idea what HTML or CSS was. I wasn't exposed to coding growing up. And so like I just wanted to make sure that I would firstly enjoy it as like a side project that I'm not paid for. And so once I realized that, oh wow, I really enjoy doing this, I went into Code Academy. And so I paid for Code Academy Pro and started learning even more in-depth things about it. And then once I realized, okay, I want to make this a career, I really wanted to accelerate my journey, and then that's when I decided to go to the boot camp.
Okay.
So it was like an incremental progress thing. It's just like, oh, I really enjoy this. Oh, wow, I really, really enjoy this. To like, okay, let's get it. Let's accelerate the journey.
So you talk about really enjoying what you're doing and the process
Mhm.
in the industry. What are some of the tools that you enjoy using as a front end developer, and why? I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, of course. So as a front-end developer, of course, HTML, semantic HTML, because accessibility is everyone's responsibility. CSS, we specifically use Sass at work, but I'm also familiar with style components, React Strap, all that jazz. I also enjoy using React. React is my favorite framework because I feel like it just makes building UIs just really simple and really easy to do. It does have its issues, but I feel like it's a pretty good framework to use for JavaScript. JavaScript will always be the bane of my existence. I do not enjoy JavaScript, but I do tolerate it. We use NPM, NPX sometimes. I also use Jest for testing. In terms of like extensions and stuff, my favorite so far is the bracket pair colorizer because sometimes looking for stuff can be a pain in my brain. And yeah, just those are some of the tools that I enjoy using, and of course, Git for version control.
So I, not being a person that does a lot of JavaScript,
Sure.
I'm gonna try to make sure I say this in the most non-biased way possible. But the 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 thing I've struggled with JavaScript the most is trying to figure out which tools are right for me. Now, I know that you focus a lot on front end development. That's kind of
Mhm.
what we're talking about, is that journey of getting started with front end development. Why why are there, I mean, I can't say why are there so many tools. You'd be like, I don't know, people just keep making them. But you know, what what do you feel are like the best tools for someone just getting started to at least have some knowledge of, or some knowledge of their existence? That way, like if they're like, hey, if I got that interview and they say, you know, what are the differences between Vue and React? And,
Mm,
you know, where we use Redux. Can, do you
mm.
think you could learn Redux? And I'd be like,
What is
probably, but
Redux?
what's the difference? I don't know.
I think there are so many tools because with JavaScript, you can do things in a myriad of ways. It doesn't have like a set pattern to do things. And that's what makes it frustrating for me personally, which is why I think TypeScript is amazing. Because it's a typed language, it will give you like clear error messaging, and you can like clearly define your types, which I think is so important and so lacking in JavaScript. But in terms of where you can go to get started with knowing about the tools, honestly, Free Code Camp is an excellent place to get started with if you want to be in front end development. They will teach you HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I do believe there's also a framework on their platform. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they have a framework, the React framework as well, that they will teach you about. You can also go to Traversy Media's YouTube channel. I'm pretty sure Brad is responsible for a lot of our front end careers because he has the best tutorials ever. They're very detailed, well explained, well laid out. And he typically uses like the latest tools and technology that we use on the front end application. When it comes to knowing the difference between the different frameworks or knowing like the different tools that we use in the front end world, Google is your best friend. Um, I Google everything. What are front end developer tools? How do I get into front end development? Those are some things that you can ask the internet for. And on GitHub, there's a full repository of like front end developer interview question and answers that you can study and reference. So I think it's just a matter of being resourceful and not being afraid to just try different things and Google, honestly.
I love that you mentioned Google being such a great resource. I don't know who's watching this, but I'm assuming that there are some people that are still in school that are, still trying to consider that pathway. I want you to be rest assured, nobody in the development space does not have to look it up sometime.
Yep.
Like whether you're looking up, what you've done in the past, previous code, whether you're looking up, a problem on Stack Overflow, whether you're looking up I sat down with like a core maintainer the other day, and we just sat there and looked at other GitHub repos just to try to figure out how we were going to solve a similar problem. It was like,
Exactly.
how are they doing this? Let's take a look at that and find out. And it's not wrong if you just don't know the answer. What's wrong is if
Exactly.
you don't know the answer and you're like, well, I'm just gonna figure it out on my own. Like, no, nobody wants you to do that. Just go Google it. It's fine.
I think that's one of the things I love about the front end development world and even just like coding in general. It's just like somebody else has had a similar problem that you're experiencing. And if you Google the right keywords, um, it has to be the right phrasing. More than likely, you will stumble upon an answer. And it's always good to give attrition. So like always reference the blog or the Stack Overflow link where you got the answer from. That way it doesn't look like it's like your work, even though it's not your work. You just change your variable name, but to always give attrition, that's very important.
Definitely. And it's also good for you because if something breaks, you can just go back and see if
Exactly.
maybe they've figured out a fix.
Exactly.
You talked about like resources, and we threw out like the Stack Overflows and the GitHubs. What other resources are not necessarily for learning, but for like sustaining that knowledge, and as new things come up and develop over time, to where you can find out about those things?
Yeah, there's an awesome, it's like slipping my mind. Front End Masters. Front End Masters is an excellent site and it's definitely worth paying for if you're a professional front end developer because their courses are so in depth and it's always very applicable to like real production environments, especially like the problems that they solve in the courses and the trainings that they do. Awesome resource, Front End Masters. Pluralsight is also a great resource to keep your knowledge up to date. They typically have a lot of more advanced courses, not just on front end development, but also back end development, the cloud training if you want to expand your skill set even more. Pluralsight is great for that too. And I personally love LinkedIn Learning. I love LinkedIn Learning because the creators on LinkedIn Learning, they use very simplistic language. I love that they assume that I know nothing. And so like they explain everything as clear as day. So I use LinkedIn Learning a lot as well, and also Pluralsight.
We were talking a little bit before we jumped on about the idea of what is the assumption that people are coming in with.
Mhm.
And we also talk about like the accessibility of programming languages and projects, and that's something that we've shared even at Elastic. Like our vision on some of our tools, like our Python client, is hey, it's API complete. You can use all the APIs that you would normally use just with our REST client, but we want to make it easier for people who don't live in this space
Right.
to be able to utilize our tooling. Do you think that that's kind of I guess a continued focus for like the front end development community? Because I can tell you now, I've got websites. I don't want to show them to any of my front end friends because they're going to be like, you need to hire a designer, you need to hire like a UX developer, a UI developer. Like you need to get all these people to like fix your stuff because it is not great. But I do think with things like Tailwind that out there, and
Yeah.
all of the stuff that came before Tailwind, like Bootstrap and Bulma and all that, like those are coming from an area of full, like, front end development may not be your full-time thing, but you should still focus on it, and you can do a little bit of work to at least make it look decent.
Yeah, and I think too, like with front end development, I know for me, like I work as a front end developer, so I'm constantly looking at front end code. And if I'm having a website, I'm not going to code it from scratch because I don't want another job. I don't want another like front end job of like maintaining that site. So I am going to use those resources that make it a lot easier, like Gatsby, like to throw something up really simply so I don't have to worry about it. I'll use WordPress to get something up really simply so I don't have to manage it. You know what I mean? So it's like, even though I'm a front end developer, I'm not going to code something from scratch because it's a lot. It's a lot of work, and there are so many aspects that come into it. And it's just like I don't want a second job.
Do
Um,
do you think at some point you should code it from scratch, like just to learn the individual
Of
pieces?
course, of course.
Yeah.
I think when you're
Yeah.
learning, absolutely code from scratch. If you're just learning JavaScript, the best way to learn is to do. And if you don't know what to build, you can Google up like front end developer projects, project ideas. Go on Twitter and look up front end developer project ideas. A lot of tech Twitter posts about ideas and stuff. Go on YouTube and look up front end developer project ideas and code along with the YouTuber. The best way to learn front end development is to actually build from scratch. So like when I say like I don't build from scratch, it's because I build at work every day and I don't want I don't want to maintain my own website,
Yeah.
right?
You don't want two jobs. I get
Yeah.
that. Like
I don't want to do that. But if you're just learning, like if you're just learning and you seriously want to make front end development a career, it's very important to learn the tools properly. So learn semantic HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Sass, maybe Tailwind, maybe what is it called? Styled components. That's a huge one as well. Learn Redux. A lot of large corporations, believe it or not, still use Redux because it was a part of their legacy code base, right? It's now called legacy code base. Wow, that's where we are. It's now a part of their legacy code base, and that's the code base that you'll be maintaining. So if you're already familiar with what Redux does and with what React does or what jQuery does, you'll be a lot more prepared for the job.
or it'll be the code base that you're migrating from to like away from. Like
Exactly. Exactly.
that was big in the Python space of like, hey, we got this Python 2 code that we need to get rid of, and we waited to the
Exactly.
last minute to do it because it's hard. Can you like do that? And it's like, well, if you don't know if you don't know how it worked before, how are you going to safely transition it into what's going on? But
Exactly. So like whenever I hear front end developers say, "Oh, Redux is dead," or "Oh, jQuery is dead," I'm just like, it's not as popular anymore, but it's not dead because companies still have it in their code bases.
I can promise you the companies that make a lot of money
Yeah.
not making technology are using this legacy technology because more than anything, it's like, hey, we're busy, selling windshield wipers or something. I don't know. I don't know what the windshield wiper technology game looks like. It might be up to date, but I'm just going to pick on them
Hilarious.
for a little bit. But they're like, we're too busy doing this. We have, a WordPress site that works that we're not going to touch.
Exactly.
And and I guess that's kind of another thing is like, there are so many systems out there. Is there value in saying, okay, I know how to work in React, but I don't know how WordPress works, or I don't
Mm,
know how, I mean, I don't like Squarespace and like how
right.
they do all their things. Is it good to have some type of knowledge of how these platforms that are designed to take a lot of load off of, you know, CEOs and entrepreneurs that don't necessarily want to think about coding?
Right.
Is it good to know how they work as well?
So here's what I think. I personally think knowledge is good, but if you don't have direction, then the knowledge isn't going to be really useful to you. So the first thing a person needs to figure out is, what do I want to do? Do I want to be a professional front end developer for a company, or do I want to be a professional freelance front end developer where I build these things for companies? So if it's like you want to work at a company, you're going to have to know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, a framework, maybe Node, maybe, of course, Git and version control testing, all those things, cross-browser development, all those things. You're going to have to know them because you're going to be responsible for building and maintaining those sites. If you're going to be a freelancer, learn the WordPress, learn the Squarespace, learn the Wix, and there's like another one out there. Learn those things because it's going to make your life a lot easier. Learn Shopify. E-commerce is huge right now. And so people just want to make sure, can my customers go to my website, click a button, and it works? They really don't care how it was built or any of that stuff. And it also makes your life a lot easier because it's like plug and play, right? They just tell you what they want, and you can charge a premium for that because you have the knowledge. So it all depends on what you want to do, honestly.
Well, I think that takes us into another question there of, is it is it easier to go one way or the other in terms of starting out? Because I know that when I was transitioning into the tech space, I had a lot of people who are like, "Oh, you should, be a consultant. You should, take what you know and apply it and do these small projects and, it's easy, you'll make money, you'll build your portfolio, all this stuff." And in my mind, I'm like, "But I don't know anything. Like, how do I like how do I tell people like, yeah, you should hire me to work on your, $1 million project when I don't know what I'm doing?" But I also understand that traditionally getting hired, they want you to have some type of history or show of what you've been able to do. So like I can kind of see where like getting started is really really complicated because you have to have some type of work to get the
Correct.
job, or you have to go out there on your own, and I don't want to say fail a lot, but
Yeah.
maybe push yourself really really hard to do things the consultant, self-employed, like that whole route.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Getting a job in tech, especially that first developer job, front end, back end, side end, it doesn't matter what end you're on. It's difficult. It is difficult. And so, like, what I like to tell my community when they ask me these questions is, I'm just like, you need to have solid projects. You need to have one or two projects that showcases your entire stack, showcases everything that you can do, because not only are you going to learn from it, and then the knowledge is going to seep into your brain a little bit better, but you're going to have something to talk about during the interview process. Something else I advise people to do is to go to local restaurants or like local businesses and say, hey, I noticed that your website isn't working. I'm happy to fix it for you for a rate of blah blah blah. Are you down for that? Because a lot of companies don't have websites, or they have websites and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so that's something else that you can do. And you can offer to do it for free, or you can offer to do it at a lower rate. And it's like, they don't know that you don't know what you're not doing, that you don't know what you're doing, right? You feel like you don't know what you're doing, but you have more knowledge than they do. So you can go ahead and figure it out.
Yeah, and that's where that again, it's okay to Google it. Like nobody's gonna
Yeah.
get mad at you. Like
Nobody knows. It's
get get
okay.
get paid and Google it. It's fine. But that's actually a good kind of another follow up question. There is there are in tech we give engineers different, I don't want to say labels, but like different priorities in what their job is. How much of a as a front end developer are you thinking about like UI, UX, accessibility? Like I know you mentioned you were talking about, certain choices in coding frameworks that you use because of accessibility, but like how much are you thinking about those things when you're getting started?
Not much.
You're like, just make the project, just make it.
Just build a project.
I like to tell people the best developers have great friends that can tell them all the things that they're doing wrong. So it's
Yes.
like, make sure in that list of friends is like a UI engineer, a UX
Yes.
engineer, a
An
test
accessibility
automation expert.
specialist.
Yes. That way you don't, it's like, these are things that you want to focus on. These are things you want to think about, but at the same time, you don't want to like,
Overwhelm yourself.
yeah. And you also don't want to have projects because you're trying to make it that $1 million, like, oh, we got, that Netflix, oh, I built a Netflix clone. It's like, no, you built the front page of Netflix. Like there's a
Correct.
lot of things that go into what Netflix is doing
Right?
that you're not necessarily on board with. Like, are you using Elasticsearch and things like that? That's my shameless plug of like, hey, Elasticsearch and all that stuff. But there's I think it's fine to get started and be like, hey, this is what I got, and we can get
Yeah.
better over time, but don't get caught up on like my project isn't necessarily the best yet.
And that's the thing too. I think a lot of times as humans, we strive to be perfect, and it's like perfection doesn't exist, right? So it's like done is better than perfect. And that's why Even like in the world of programming, we have like a sprints and we have incremental changes and incremental improvements, because the first pass isn't always going to be the best solution, right? But you iterate and you improve upon it over and over, the more you learn and the more that you're exposed to. If you're just getting started in front end development and you really want to make it a career, focus on learning the basics. Focus on learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript. That's the basic, and that is a lot to grasp. And so, like, don't get bogged down in UI and UX and accessibility and performance and all these things, and not like all the tools that are out there. Because I swear, like, every single day it's a new front end tool that I need to learn to, to stay relevant. But it's just like, don't get bogged down in those details. Learn the fundamentals, because if you know the fundamentals, you'll be able to adapt and to grow and succeed.
I like that. I like the idea that it's okay to not know everything, but to still have to still have an idea of what's out there. And
Correct.
that's, again, I'm not a front end developer, so I'm not going to say that it can be intimidating, but I think that that is a level of intimidation of like, I've got to learn all this. And it's like, well, maybe just start with like the basics.
Exactly. Exactly.
So we're about halfway, we're about the halfway mark of what we got. I want to turn it a little bit more on like the idea that you've kind of built yourself a brand around this idea of, I do front end dev, but I also teach people how to, get into the industry, how to make those career changes. What was the reasoning that you had to say, I don't necessarily want to just do this, but I also want to like talk about this and teach this?
Yeah, honestly, so I started sharing content online because I wasn't confident in my own skills. And so I wanted to improve my confidence in talking about technical topics. That is honestly the reason I started. And then it turned into something more. And so like now, yeah, I meet with people one on one. I talk to them about their goals. I help them with their resume, their LinkedIn, their boot camp. I'm just like, who am I? Who is this person? But it's been really great. And I guess like now I'm building the brand because I would love to be that resource for especially boot campers, especially boot camp graduates, to come to and say, hey, what do I need to do to get to where you are right now? Like, that's where I want to be. How do I get there? So like right now, I just want to be a resource, honestly. I just honestly just want to be helpful.
I know that a lot of the work that you're doing in that area is focused on Instagram. Why did you choose Instagram as that platform?
I chose Instagram because Instagram kind of have everything, right? I could go live. I'm on stories. I can talk to people every day. I can post photos. I can post like quotes. I could do videos. I could do long form videos. I feel like for me, Instagram was that all in one platform. And my plan was to cross post across platforms, but that was too overwhelming. I do have a job that I need to keep because I do need to eat. But yeah, I decided to focus on Instagram because it just seemed like an all-in-one platform. And I like Instagram. I was on Instagram a lot, so I was just like, why not just start creating on Instagram?
Do you think that there are certain platforms that cater to teaching uh, folks to get into like front end development, or I guess development in general, that like, I guess, over others? We don't have to talk about the over others part, but like, are there platforms that are just really good for that? I mean, I
Of
guess outside of
course.
Instagram.
Of course, YouTube. YouTube is the perfect platform for that. And so like I'm trying to get up the courage to start a YouTube channel. But I haven't done that yet. But YouTube is the perfect place for that because you can create workshops on YouTube pretty much. Many workshops that teaches people specifically how to do things like Traversy Media, right? I learned
Yeah.
so much from Brad. And so I think YouTube is a great platform for teaching specifically. Instagram is great for like snippets and connecting with people on a personal level, I think.
Well, since you gave YouTube the shout out, by the way, folks that are watching right now, make sure make sure if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and then also leave a comment. Let us know what questions you would love for us to ask. And if you're
Yep.
not yet, be sure to subscribe. Okay, now back to the you got it. And I think that's the thing is I think that there's a lot of in order to be I don't even want to say successful, but I guess the notion for a lot of folks is the people out here on Instagram, the people that are out here on YouTube, like that's their job. And I mean, that is like a myth that I am trying to dispel quickly. Like, I mean, yes, right now we're streaming on YouTube on behalf of Elastic because I am an employee of Elastic. Like that's
Correct.
why we're here. But I will say like this is like an hour a week. Really, it's more like 2 or 3 hours a week of what I do in the grand scheme of like my job as a developer advocate.
Yep.
And I feel like for you've definitely shown here that like a lot of our job is learning. A lot of our job is teaching what we've learned in some cases, but then there's also that level of just doing. And if we don't do all three of those things, we fail to grow in our own like roles that we're in.
Absolutely. I will say that starting Instagram has not only increased my confidence in speaking about technical topics, but it has opened up so many opportunities for me, even at my job. I've been able to do so many different tech events because I decided to start my Instagram page and really like put myself out there and learn how to speak to a community of people online on the internet, right? Because we're just looking at cameras and talking to ourselves when we're recording, and then we post it and we hope people enjoy the content. But you're so right, Jay. Like, Instagram is a very small part of my life. The majority of my life is work.
I also feel like that helps you kind of in the workspace too, because like we have meetings are a thing. Like
Mhm.
if you thought that being a developer meant that you would never talk to people, oh, you were wrong. And
Mm-mm.
the more you grow in that space, the more talking to people you do.
Yes.
So not only does building a platform around something like Instagram or YouTube or even Twitter, like
Hmm.
that will help you be able to communicate effectively to stakeholders. It'll help you communicate to your teammates, to people in the community. It'll help you network. And I will tell you, a lot of jobs that people get are from networking is
Yes.
super important. Don't forget that.
Yes. I will say, like, I'm of the opinion that communication is the most important skill for software engineers and like developers, period. Because if you don't know how to talk about what you just built, nobody cares. If you don't know how to communicate how this solves the business problem, nobody cares. And so, like, it's very important to improve your written communication, verbal communication, and reading comprehension skills. Communication is going to like bring you through the journey.
So we talked about like the training on like front end masters
Mhm.
and LinkedIn Learning. I want to give kind of a shout out to LinkedIn Learning in that I think that that's one of the only platforms that covers both the technical side of things as well as, some people call them soft skills or dynamic skills or like whatever you call those, like me not sitting in front of an IDE writing code, like skills, communication, leadership, teamwork, those whole
Yes.
things. LinkedIn Learning has a lot of those resources. We're not sponsored by LinkedIn
No,
Learning,
we're not.
but at the same time, like I've learned a lot through that
Me
platform as
too.
well.
Me too. And one thing people often forget when they're learning to be developers is like you have to know how to read people's code and how to critically think about that code and provide valuable and actionable feedback on that code, because that's the only way the developer team is going to get better and the product that you're building is going to be a good one. Communication, man, it's everywhere. You can't get away from it. We're communicating right now, you know?
Exactly. Speaking of which, I'm gonna ask you a hard one here. What was it like the first time that you had to share your code with either like a manager or a peer?
It was nerve-wracking. So like it was remember like I started working as a developer January 2020. So last year, 2020 of last year is my very first developer role. And within the first week, I opened my first pull merge request. We call it MRs, merge request. And it was nerve-wracking. I was just like, do I really know what I'm doing? Who do I think I am? How did I get this job? Oh my gosh. So it was definitely nerve-wracking. And the imposter syndrome monster just comes out and tells you that you're still silly, you're stupid, you're dumb. What are you doing here? Who do you think you are? What's going on? But over time, it gets easier because I was fortunate enough to have a very kind team. And so the feedback I got was not personal, it was just very like actionable.
I like that. And I also want to ask the question around what did your team do to make that transition easy for you? Because you mentioned them being kind, being empathetic, those traits. I hope that some of the people listening are not just like I'm trying to get into the industry, but it's like, hey, I'm onboarding, junior developers for the first time, or I'm leading a team for the first time.
Mhm.
How can those folks make sure that those new developers or those new front end devs really have a good experience and stay in the industry?
I think two things come to mind immediately: mentorship and having a clear onboarding process. So, in my very first role, I was a junior developer last year. I was promoted this year, so no longer classified as a junior technically, but in my brain, I'm still a junior.
I think
But
that's always the case.
I think mentorship. So, I kind of assigned somebody on my team as my mentor, and he was happy to do it because he loved helping. And so he was my go-to person for anything work related, like the product that we're building. If I had a question, I would go to him first. He was my first stop, and then he would like trickle me out and direct me to like where to go. And even like having a clear onboarding process so that the junior developers understand the expectations. Like, what am I expected to do? Am I expected to know everything? I know nothing. What is this code doing? How do I read this documentation? Right. And so, like, having a clear onboarding process includes having documentation. Are your processes documented? How do I even start looking at the product that we're building, right? Are your readmes up to date? How do I use this API? Where do I find XYZ? You know what I mean? Documentation is so important in the onboarding process, and having like a buddy to go to, like a mentor to go to say, hey, I'm having issues with this, can you please help me? That's been invaluable for me, because having that one person to go to, or having somebody to go to that I know will respond positively to me, such a huge burden was lifted, like a mental burden was lifted off of me.
I'm not gonna lie. My first like open source contribution was absolutely documentation because I was
Yes.
reading it and it was like, I don't understand what this means. So then I asked like the maintainer and they're like, oh, well, yeah, here's a resource, da 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 da, and this is what that means. I go, can I just submit a PR to update this to say exactly what you just said? Because that was helpful.
Yes. Yes. I say documentation is so important. And it's like you can have documentation, but is it documented properly? Like, is it the right documentation?
There is so many resources out there. I'm gonna give a shout out to Write the Docs, a great organization that helps to promote good documentation and the writing of good documentation. Um, be sure to go look at them up. I'm gonna have to like go back through this video and just make a list of like, here are all the resources that Kadesha just mentioned and that we were talking about and training and all this stuff. I feel like that would be super useful.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess that kind of takes me to a follow-up question before we start looking at like wrapping up and all that. But ongoing learning, like it at some point, we've been telling you it's okay to Google it, it's okay to Google it, but you do want to start like collecting that knowledge base. How are you doing that? How are you saying like, this is like my starter template. This is where I'm, whenever I need to do this thing, this is where I go to find that. Are you just keeping all that in your head? Do you have it written down somewhere?
Oh, yes. So I use at work, I use Microsoft OneNote. That's where I keep like all the work related things. So like I have like a list of links and stuff. We also have a Confluence at work. So I have a Confluence page where I keep like all the resources. And of course, I have folders in my browser for like different bookmarks. So like there's reading, HR stuff, tests, all the things, front end stuff listed in like docs. That's how I keep track of stuff there. And like in my personal life, I use Notion, love Notion. And so that's how I track every single thing. Like if I find something and I love it, I'll typically send myself a message on Twitter. And that's how I have the links. And then I'll just add it to my Notion doc when I get home.
I love that. I love that, like the idea of having your own personal knowledge resource and then having a resource for like your team. There are so many things that when people are onboarding, it's like, I've got to learn all this stuff. I've got to I got to read the employee handbook. I'm going to say that quietly. Like you have to learn who's on your team, who's
Yeah.
good at doing what things. And there are a lot of things that it will just be beneficial for you to have as a resource when you're getting started. But on top of that, also having that for yourself of like,
Yes.
I'm not going to be able to remember this for all time, so let me just have this we call them like personal knowledge management tools and all this stuff, but let me have some resource that I can go to that said like, what was that one thing I tried to do like a few years ago, and what were the blog posts to help me walk through that. I think that's a super clutch idea for people that are learning and that are just getting started, because I'm going to talk about the last topic here, getting that first job. Are you able to tell us a little bit of what that interview process looked like? Obviously, we don't need any like details or anything, but like you had, I'm sure, a spoken interview, maybe a whiteboard, and like what were some of the things that helped you prepare for that?
Yeah, getting that first job is difficult. I got my first job at a conference. I was hired at the Grace Hopper conference in 2019. And
Okay.
thankfully, I didn't have to do like a whiteboarding challenge, because if I had to, but for my second role, it was a telephone call. Then it was like panel interview. Then it was like individual panel interviews with 6 people. That's 6 different interviews in one day. And then it was like a coding challenge. And then it was like another thing. And then it was a decision. So like this interviewing process to be a developer is intense. The best way to prepare is to over prepare. Honestly. And especially if you want to work in the big, like the huge tech companies, like the FANG companies, data structures and algorithms are going to be your best friend. LeetCode, HackerRank, what is the other one called? Those other platforms that you can, practice those algorithmic quizzes. Is going to be your best friend for preparing for those like really difficult interviewing experiences. I do notice that a lot more companies are moving towards like project-based interviewing, which I love, especially for front-end developers, because we're pretty much just building and maintaining projects for the companies that we work for. But yeah, definitely data structures and algorithms, super important to know and understand. Having a clear understanding of what JavaScript is, the difference between class components, functional components. Why did we start using use state and use effect? Like, why did we start using hooks? Like, what does that solve? Like all these things. What is context? What's the point of it? All these things. Like, it's important to over prepare. And the best way to do that is to Google front end interview questions, GitHub, and a GitHub repository should come up that has like question and answers that you can reference. That was a lot. I'll stop talking now.
No, that's you mentioned why you moving over to like states, and I was like, oh, that's that React thing that I am terrible at. Like, let me try to. I was gonna follow up like, what? Well, why did we like just asking for a friend like? But no, I 100% agree with all of that. There is a lot, and you want to over prepare.
Yeah.
But I also like want to encourage you to remember that an interview is not just you getting a job, it's you selecting a
Correct.
company.
Correct.
So like make sure that that first job is going to be one that caters to learn, like a learning environment. As a junior developer, no matter how much you over prepare, no matter how much you want to learn, there's going to be so much that you don't know.
Yes.
And we're not calling anybody out, but there are a lot of companies that will hire you as a junior developer for pay reasons and not for experience reasons. Like, they
Yes.
want you to come in and do the work of a mid-level or senior engineer
Yes.
and pay you as a junior because you lack the experience.
Yes.
So what you have to do is kind of that due diligence of like, is this going to be a team that I can jump on and spend some time learning? I'm going to wax poetic about Elastic. They are an employer. They are, obviously, we're on their channel right now. But when I started at Elastic, the first thing that my boss told me was like, you have as much time as you need to learn about the Elastic Stack. There is a lot, we had Enrico tell us there are over 400 API, endpoints that you don't necessarily need to know all of them, but you need to understand like where they're kind of segmented in and how they work.
Yeah.
But more than anything, like, take that time to learn and take time throughout your entire career. Have focused time on, I am going to be learning about this thing. I'm going to be learning about this thing that makes me a better developer in the long run, and also ensures that I can move up the round, up that ladder at the right pace. Because if you don't, you're gonna wind up exiting, and
Yeah.
like, nobody wants that. Nobody wants anyone. Well, nobody wants anyone that's being productive and helping in the community to leave the community, but it happens all the time.
Mm.
So as our last question here, what has kept you, now that you've been in the industry for 2 years, you came from another industry, you saw that, like, okay, for reasons, I need to move into this space, I like this space, like, what keeps you in the tech space, and what parting words do you want to impart on these people that are just entering it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I stay here because it's interesting. It's difficult to get bored. If I am bored, it's because of me and not because of the industry or the work that I do. There is so much to learn all the time. It can be overwhelming, but it's mostly exciting, and I can never master this thing. And I think that's what intrigues me about it. It's just like I can never master this. As soon as I think I know something, no, you don't. Go back and study it. And for those like just coming up, it's just like always tell yourself, this is something I tell myself every day this year. It's just like you can do hard things. It's like I went from being a social worker to now working for a very large company on their engineering team. What? You can do hard things. I have done hard things and I'm going to keep doing hard things. And so like whenever that little voice comes into your head and say, I can't do this, just cry it out, eat some fries, and just get back to it. It's okay.
Plus one to the fries. And if you're in Canada, poutine, like, it's fries plus plus. It's amazing.
Yes.
Kadesha, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest on the show. In a few seconds, we're going to be asking Kadesha where people can find her. I've kept it on the screen intentionally, so if you have not yet followed her on Instagram and Twitter, what are you doing? But I want to also let you know, normally the topic can be whatever. Next week, we're going to be talking about using Spring Data with Elasticsearch and the reactive Elasticsearch repository. I'm coming in that one blind. I'm here to learn and learn and learn. But if you have a question, if you have an Elasticsearch question, then feel free to drop in at discuss.elastic.co. If you want to catch a future meetup or a future event, go to community.elastic.co. And of course, if you want to see all the amazing things that Elastic is doing in and around the Elastic Stack, in and around the tech community, be sure to follow us on socials at Elastic Everywhere. But Kadesha, thank you once again for being a wonderful guest and helping walk through this journey. Again, I am terrified of front end development because I am bad at it. But thank you for making me feel like it's okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
Let everybody know one more time where they can find you, and tell people about the podcast too, because we didn't talk about the
Oh,
podcast that much. I'm gonna
yeah.
throw that in there too.
Yeah, sure. You can find me on Instagram. I'm mostly on Instagram at It's That Lady Dev. I just started posting on TikTok of all places. So you can look me up on TikTok as well. I'm also on Twitter at It's That Lady Dev. And I do co-host a podcast. It's called Deeper Than Tech. And we talk about what it's like to be Black women in tech and how you can become another person in technology. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. And yeah.
I need to learn more about that TikTok user
Oh
story
my
there, because
goodness.
as an advocate, it's one of the things I see some people trying, and I'm interested, but at the same time, like I feel like I'm too old. But
Me
you
too.
know, well, thank you so much, Kadesha, and thank you everybody for hanging out with us. Again, we are here every Tuesday for the most part at 11 a.m. Pacific time for about an hour. Be sure to come hang out with us. If you haven't yet, be sure to like the video, subscribe, do all those things. But until next time, have a great day, everyone.
Bye.